sounds are just so loud. Apparently God likes loud sometimes. And listen, some of you are like, well, that's just not who I am. And listen, that's okay. Hey, get this, when you're God and you create people, then look, you can tell them to praise you the way you like it done, right? You can tell them to put their hands in their pocket. I want people to praise me with hands in their pocket. Right? I want people to praise me with folded arms. I want the people to praise me falling asleep in church. Hey, you're God, you can do that, but you're not. He is. And because of that, listen, God gets to define our worship. See, and listen, I don't lift my hands because I always want to, right? It's not that we clap our hands because we're always going to feel like it. But again, it's because we do it as an act of worship to our God. In fact, just this word praise, I think, can sometimes stretch us, right? You know, that whole psalm right there, where it's just one thing, praise Him, praise Him, praise Him, let everything that has breath praise Him. I think that word praise can really stretch us because the interesting thing with praise, that word praise, it literally comes from this idea of hallel. And this word hallel literally means to shine, hence to make a show, to boast, and thus to be clamorously foolish, to rave, to celebrate. Sounds more like a football game than oftentimes what happens at a church on the weekend. And yet God's like, that's kind of what I like. I like it to be a little loud. I like it to be a little boisterous. I like there to be some life. And again, this can be a challenge for us because for some of us, when it comes to worship, we like to almost just kind of think, well, I'll just worship Him in my mind. I'll just kind of think about worship. Just kind of, just process it. Think. The truth is, worship, and in fact, actually, we even see this in the story of David here, is, man, there's a physical element to it. Like there's some motion to it. Like there's some activity to it. In fact, with David, when he's worshiping, there's a part there where it says, in verses 14 to 15, where it says he's wearing a linen ephod. And listen, this is more than a fashion statement here. This is not like, hey, and David, during the fall, he's now wearing our latest model of linen ephods. No, David, remember, he's king. So everywhere he would have gone, he would have worn this really heavy king's robe. But because he's moving this ark, he's moving the presence of God, he's in this process of worship. Man, he knew that listen, I can't worship God and keep carrying these heavy robes because, man, this is a workout. There's a physical element to this. He's building up a sweat. He's basically doing like Adam Levine at the halftime show. He's working up a sweat. There's a physical element to worship, right? And look, when I say all this, I'm not saying we need to be crazy for crazy's sake. I'm not saying we need to start pulling out all the tambourines. Please don't pull out the tambourines. But I just want to challenge you that when it comes to worship, don't just put God in the box of just what you like. Or even what you're comfortable with. Listen, God, again, He wrote this entire book about worship called the Psalms. And look, to be honest, it looks different all throughout. It's not always in the left. There's times of reflection. There's a lot of different expressions of worship throughout there. But God says, David, you're trying to make it easy on yourself. You like putting the box in the back of the pickup truck, and that's easy for you, but that's not the way I want it. And if this is for me, you're going to be willing to lay down your preferences. Because again, real worship, it takes some sacrifice. You want to worship me? Man, choose to worship me the way I desire to be worshipped. Choose to show love to me the way I long to be loved by you. Hey, you want to show love me? Hey, wash the dishes, right? Always like, she's nodding the head. I always want to do the dishes. That doesn't do it for me, but it does it for her. And that's kind of where God's like, hey, you want to worship me? You want to show love for me? You want to show thanks and gratitude to me? Wash the dishes. And again, I realize this is a stretch for some of us. It's like, man, I don't know, that's not me. I'm more reserved. Well, you know what? You start off by just like rocking the baby, right? You don't have to go like full hand spread, go all wide and seeing with this thing. But again, the point is, worship, it's not a spectator sport. Which leads to this question, which is, why is all this even necessary? Why all the motion? Why all the commotion? Why is it necessary? And to understand this, we got to go back to one of the golden times, the golden ages, one of the great times of our modern history. We got to go all the way back to the 1980s. And specifically, one of the great theological cinematic masterpieces known as The Karate Kid. Anyone remember the original Karate Kid? Not the latest remake one, that was terrible, but like the original Karate Kid, right? And it was this sort of, for those of you that are, that was before your time, I get it. Just to give you a little glimpse into the whole kind of synopsis of The Karate Kid. Basically, Daniel, the one who's wearing the little bandana there on his head, he recently moves to California, and when he goes to California, he's sort of just treated as an outsider. He has a really hard time kind of adjusting into high school, and in the process runs into these guys in his school who just start bullying him, start picking on him, and so he's after there's one kind of scene in particular where it's at night and he's at a party and they just beat the snot out of him, and so he's on his way back to their apartment place and he's bleeding and he's just frustrated, and he's like goes up to his mom. He's like, I want to go back home. I'm tired of being here. And in that process, he meets a guy by the name of Mr. Miyagi, the other guy there on the side. And Mr. Miyagi kind of agrees to kind of train him on how to kind of defend himself, to kind of protect himself from these bullies in his school. And so Daniel, he starts to get excited, starts to see some life again, some light at the end of the tunnel with this move. And so he's like, man, this is awesome. You're going to train me. You're going to teach me how to fight back, how to defend myself, how to protect myself. And so he begins this training process. And for like the first several months, it doesn't seem like any training is happening at all. In fact, it actually seems just the opposite. It just seems like it's just one chore after the next. As Mr. Miyagi has to like paint his fence. He's got like all this fencing around his house. He has to like wax the car, wash all of his cars, because apparently Mr. Miyagi was a serious car enthusiast, and he must have won the lottery because he has like 20 cars, it seems like in the movie. But he's washing all these cars, right? And after like 3 months of this, Daniel, he starts getting frustrated. And he's like, I'm done with this. Like you said you were going to train me, and all I've been doing is these chores and going through all these motions, and it just doesn't seem like it even matters. What's the point of it, right? And just as he's getting ready to quit, just as he's getting ready to leave, Mr. Miyagi pulls him over. He's like, Danielson, show me, wax the car. And Danielson's like, what are you talking about? He's like, wax on, wax off, wax on, wax off. And he's like, Danielson, show me, paint the fence. And he's like, all right. He's like, painting the fence. And all the while, it's like there's like this moment, this light bulb moment for Daniel. Like all of a sudden, like these motions, all these things that he thought was just going through the motions, didn't seem to make any sense, didn't seem like it had any purpose to it. Was reality, was training to teach him how to fight back. And listen, I share that because in a spiritual sense, that's how worship works as well. Listen, whatever it is, well, why all the commotion? Why all the fuss? Man, why the hand raising? Why all that stuff? Because again, it's in our worship that we fight back. It's in our worship that God, with all these motions, it's this training, it's this teaching how to fight back in a spiritual sense, to be able to fight back against depression, to fight back against disappointment, to fight back against discouragement, to be able to fight back against fear. That's what happens when we worship. And in fact, it's interesting, one of the paradoxical kind of truths of the Bible is this idea that victory is actually found in surrender. That victory is found in surrender. In fact, it's interesting, when the Israelites, whenever in the Old Testament they would go out to battle, they would oftentimes have the ark of God, the presence of God, go before them. But also there was this group known as the Levites, who were, their job was basically to lead the nation of Israel in worship. And I love this picture. It's this picture of worship leading them into battle, worship leading them to victory. Because here's what you got to get. See, they knew something, that victory, the victory they were praying for, wasn't something they could attain in their own strength, but only in surrender to God, only in this act of worship to God. See, worship wasn't just a result of victory. It was the very thing that helped to lead them and sustain them to victory. Which leads to the final thing here. And kind of the importance of worship is that that our worship, it sustains us. Worship sustains us. See, 2 Samuel 6:13 says, when those who were carrying the ark of the Lord had taken 6 steps. I love that. 6 steps. He sacrificed a bull and fat calf. In other words, he offered worship to God. Now notice it says they stopped to worship specifically after 6 steps. I've shared this before. See, the Bible, of course, numbers, they mean something. Numbers have significance. And so in the Bible, in 7 literally means completion. It means the end of the road, the end of a journey, right? And what's interesting about this text is David, he doesn't worship on step 7 when he's gotten to the victory, when he's gotten to the city, when he's gotten to Jerusalem. No, it says he worshiped God after the 6th step. And here's the point. See, real worship doesn't wait until 7. Real worship doesn't wait for completion. It doesn't wait for the tension to be solved. It doesn't wait for the healing to be complete. It doesn't wait for the answer or the prayer to be answered. It doesn't wait for the journey to be over. Like, man, I'm just so glad this season's finally done. Or even when the victory happens. Real worship is even when I'm still in the mess. Even when I'm still on step 6. Real worship is simply in response to God's victory in our life. It isn't simply in response to God's victory in our life. It's what helps lead us and sustain us to God's victory for our lives. It's why I found that oftentimes when I want to worship God the least is actually when I need it the most. When I feel like worshiping God the least. When I'm going through the muck, when I'm going through the mire, when I'm going through the messes, that's when I need to worship God the most, because that's how we fight. That's how we fight. That it's in that worship that, again, it's not just a response to God's victory, so it's actually what helps sustain us. It leads us into God's victory. And I think, unfortunately, way too many of us, we get stuck at 6. We give up at 6. We stop worshiping on 6. We stop going to church on 6. Because on 6, that's when stuff gets real. On 6, that's when humanity happens. On 6, that's when the mess happens. When you feel like I'm already tired of walking and still not where I want to be or where I thought I would be yet. And you stop one step short. And instead of worshiping on 6, you give up on 6. But the truth is this, listen, I'm telling you, you'll never get there. You'll never get there. Wherever there is for you, whatever the there is you're praying for, whatever the there is you're hoping for, listen, I'm telling you, you will never get there if you wait until there to worship God for there. You just won't. Because it's our worship that helps to sustain us. It's our worship that helps to lift us up. And so tonight, that's what we're going to do. We're going to wrap this thing up and do something a little bit differently tonight. In fact, I want to invite you to stand if you can. And we're just going to close out on worship one more time. And so I'll invite the worship team up here. And I want to pray for you, because some of you, again, like you hear this. It's like that's great, preacher. Yeah, I need to worship. And not just a response to victory, but understand that's actually my worship that helps to lead me, to sustain me to victory. But man, I'm telling you, I don't feel like it right now. Man, if you knew what I was going through, you knew what was happening in my marriage, if you really knew what was going on in my job, worship God. And yeah, I'm telling you, sometimes it's the times when you feel it the least, that's when you need to worship Him the most. Because it's in our worship that we fight back. It's in our worship. I know it might just seem like a bunch of emotions. It might seem like it's just a song. But I'm telling you that there's a battle that's happening. And when you worship, in fact, the Bible says our battle is not against flesh and blood, but against the unseen powers and principalities of the world around. There's something in our worship that just gives us the strength to rise above our weakness. It's something about our worship when we lift our hands up and we give Him praise that gives us a hope that rises above our doubts, that gives us a faith that rises above our fear. Listen, I don't know what you're in. I don't know the step 6 you're struggling with, but I'm telling you, if you want to find yourself being led into victory and not just settling for defeat, I'm telling you, for some of you, it begins with an act of worship, of lifting your voices, of lifting your perspective. Even though you might not feel it. God, I'm going to worship you. Because I know that I can't make it through what I'm going through the situation I'm facing. I can't do it on my own. So I'm going to worship you. I'm going to surrender because again, in the Bible, victory, it starts with surrender. It starts with saying, God, I can't do this on my own. And listen, for some of you, the greatest act of worship you can make right now, it isn't so much a lifting of the hands or even a lifting of the voice. It's a surrendering and giving your heart to Jesus. But the Bible says that calls us to actually give, and speaking of worship, to give a living sacrifice. It's a surrendering. It's a saying that God, it's just acknowledging that God, I'm in step 6. I'm in a mess, and I'm in a mess that I can't get out of on my own. And yet victory comes with surrender. And so God, I'm choosing my act of worship tonight as a surrendering my life to you, Jesus. That you would come in and you would be Lord of my life. And so if that's you, if you're in a place where, again, you've been trying to do it on your own for way too long. You've been, if you're honest, kind of worshiping yourself. I can make it my own way. I can do it on my own terms. I can live life and it just feels like you just hit one dead end after the next. Listen, I'm telling you, maybe, just maybe, God brought you here to make the ultimate act of worship of surrendering your life to Him. And being reminded, listen, He didn't create you to do life on your own. He created you to do life in relationship with Him. And so if that's you, if you've never asked Jesus to come into your life, or maybe if you're honest, it's just been a long time, and you've kind of drifted to your own way, and your own kind of terms, and your own way of doing things, listen, tonight if you'd say, I'm going to commit my life to you, Jesus. Surrender my life to you. Maybe in some cases, surrender my life again. With every head bowed, every eye closed, we simply raise your hand. I want to pray for you tonight. I want to pray for you. Pray this with me in your heart. Father God, I acknowledge I've made more than a few mistakes. And yet, I believe you love me enough to come, to die on a cross, to pay the price in full for all of my sin, for all of my shame, for all of my past, present, future mistakes. And so, Jesus, I ask you now to come into my life, to be Lord and Savior of my life, to bring about something in me that I can't simply contain in me anymore. I've got to let it out. I've got to worship. When I think of your grace, and when I think of your joy, when I think of your mercy and your goodness. And so right now, we just want to worship you, God. We want to celebrate you in your goodness. Even when we don't always feel like it, even when we can't see it, God, we're going to lift up your name, Jesus. We're going to worship you in this place one more time. And I believe that as we worship, as we lift up our voice, there's going to be some chains that start falling off some of you. There's going to be some freedom that you're going to start stepping into. There's going to be a fresh perspective on a situation that's going to come to some of you. There's going to come a fresh hope as we worship our God tonight. Let's worship Him one more time.